My name is Dr. Zara Mitchell. I'm 28 years old, and I'm speaking to you from my laboratory in Boston, a space that I built with my own hands, my own designs, and my unwavering commitment to making prosthetic technology accessible to every person who needs it, regardless of their bank account. If you are listening to this, I request you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you are listening this from. I want to tell you something that I learned the hard way. The people you let into your life can either elevate you or destroy you, and sometimes the person sleeping in the bed next to yours is secretly working against your dreams. But more importantly, I want to tell you this. If someone steals your invention, if someone tries to profit from your sacrifice, you have the power to reclaim not just your work, but your legacy. And you can do it through excellence, through persistence, and through the unwavering belief that what you created belongs to the people who need it most. So let me start at the beginning, not my story alone, but the story of my family and the values they instilled in me that would become my anchor when everything else fell apart. My family was not rich in money, but we were wealthy in purpose. My father, Marcus Mitchell, was a biomedical engineer. He worked for a major prosthetics company designing advanced limbs for military veterans. He was brilliant, meticulous, the kind of man who would spend weeks perfecting a single joint mechanism. Every limb we design, he used to say, is someone's second chance at their life. That's sacred work. He made a good salary, enough for us to live comfortably in a nice neighborhood in Atlanta, but he carried a burden with him every day. The technology is amazing, he would tell me over dinner, but it's so expensive. Most people can't afford it. Most people who lose limbs just have to accept being less than whole, and that breaks my heart. My mother, Diane Mitchell, was a physical therapist who worked with amputees. She spent her days helping people relearn how to walk, how to move, how to reclaim their independence. She earned a fraction of what my father made, but her patients loved her fiercely. Money doesn't matter, she used to say. What matters is that I get to see my patients walk out of my clinic and walk back into their lives. I had a younger brother, David, who was 5 years younger than me. He was athletic, energetic, and deeply empathetic. Even as a child, he understood that my parents' work wasn't just about medicine, it was about human dignity. I was born in 1996, and I grew up watching my parents dedicate themselves to healing. I watched my father engineer solutions to problems that seemed impossible. I watched my mother transform people's lives through patience, encouragement, and belief. I watched them discuss the gap between what technology could do and what people could afford. And I understood from a very early age that there was injustice in that gap. My parents taught me 3 core values, and they taught them through their actions, not their words. The first value was intellectual courage. Ask hard questions. Don't accept the status quo just because it's always been that way. If something seems wrong, dig deeper. If something can be improved, imagine how to improve it. I watched my father spend his evenings sketching new designs, not because his job required it, but because he believed he could do better. He would challenge himself constantly. The second value was compassion for the marginalized. Success isn't measured by how much money you make. It's measured by how many people you help. It's measured by whether you use your talents to lift up those who have been left behind. I watched my mother work with patients who had no insurance, who had suffered trauma, who had lost hope. She gave them everything she had. The third value was protecting your work. Guard your ideas fiercely. Don't let anyone take what belongs to you. Value yourself and your creations enough to defend them. My father had been burned before by colleagues who took credit for his designs. He learned to protect his intellectual property carefully. Your ideas are your power, he told me. Never let anyone convince you that your work belongs to them. I was 9 years old when I first understood that I wanted to solve the prosthetics problem. My father brought home a picture of a prosthetic leg. It was beautiful, engineered with precision, built to last for years, capable of incredible mobility. "How much does this cost?" I asked my father. "About $100,000, my father said. I couldn't comprehend that number. To me, it was infinite. "Why is it so expensive?" I asked. "Materials, research, manufacturing, and everyone in the supply chain wants their profit margin. But that means poor people can't have them," I said. "No," my father said, and there was sadness in his voice. "They can't." That night, I made a decision. I was going to figure out how to make prosthetics cheaper. I was going to democratize this technology. I didn't know how. I didn't know if it was possible, but I knew that it had to be done. I went to MIT on a full scholarship. I was 18 years old, ambitious, and absolutely certain that I was going to change the world. I studied biomedical engineering. I took every class related to prosthetics, biomechanics, material science, and manufacturing. I was obsessed. While other students went to parties on Friday nights, I was in the lab running experiments. My parents encouraged this intensity, but with a warning. "Zara," my mother said during my sophomore year, "you're brilliant, but remember that this work is about people, not just about the engineering. Don't lose sight of why you started." "I won't," I promised, and I meant it. In my junior year, I started to develop my first project, a design for an affordable prosthetic leg that used 3D printing technology, advanced materials that were cheaper than traditional prosthetics, and a modular design that could be customized for individual patients. The goal was to bring the cost down from $100,000 to $5,000. Everyone told me it was impossible. "The materials won't withstand the stress," my professors said. "The design is too simplistic," they said. "You're taking on something too big," they said. But I kept working. In the spring of my senior year, I had a breakthrough. I realized that I didn't need to engineer something that would last forever. I needed to engineer something that was replaceable, upgrading, and affordable. A prosthetic that could be replaced every 2 years instead of every 10 years, but at a fraction of the cost. This changed everything. With this insight, I redesigned the entire leg. I found materials that were strong but cheap. I developed a 3D printing process that was fast and scalable. I created a modular system where different components could be swapped out depending on the patient's needs and lifestyle. I built a prototype, and it worked. I tested it myself using a special harness that simulated an amputee's gait. The leg was responsive. It was stable. It was beautiful. I submitted my design to my senior thesis committee. The professor who reviewed it was stunned. "This is extraordinary work," she said. "Have you thought about what you're going to do with this?" "I'm going to bring it to market," I said, "and I'm going to make it affordable to everyone." After graduation, I had multiple job offers. Companies wanted to hire me. The prosthetics industry wanted me. But I turned them all down. Instead, I decided to pursue a graduate degree in biomedical engineering at MIT with a focus on developing my prosthetics design further. I wanted time to refine the technology, to test it more thoroughly, to prepare it for real-world use. I also needed to solve one logistical problem. Where would I work? The lab space at MIT was valuable, but it wasn't ideal for developing a product I intended to commercialize. My parents suggested I move back to Atlanta, but I loved Boston. I had friends here. I had access to the resources I needed. Then, in the fall of my first year of graduate school, I faced a practical problem. Commuting between my apartment and MIT was taking 4 hours a day. I was exhausted. My productivity was suffering. The solution came when my university offered housing in their graduate dormitory. I would share a room with another graduate student. It wasn't ideal, I would lose my privacy, but it would cut my commute to 15 minutes. I moved into the dorm in January, and that's when I met her. Her name was Nadia Chen. She was a graduate student in mechanical engineering. She was beautiful, driven, and seemed to have it all figured out. We didn't like each other at first. Nadia had always dismissed my work on prosthetics as too idealistic. "You can't help everyone," she used to say. "The free market determines what gets built." "The free market leaves people behind," I would respond. "That's why I'm doing this." She would roll her eyes and go back to her own work. But we shared a room, so we had to coexist, and over the months, something shifted. We started eating meals together. We started talking about our research. We started studying late into the night, helping each other solve problems. I told her about my prosthetics design. I showed her my prototypes. I explained the engineering challenges and how I was solving them. Nadia became my friend, or so I thought. What I didn't know was that Nadia was watching me with growing jealousy. She had her own graduate research, something about advanced materials for industrial applications, but it wasn't going well. Her papers weren't getting published, her designs weren't working, she was falling behind. And then she watched as my research started to get attention. I presented my prosthetics design at a university symposium. Faculty members came up to me afterward, excited. One professor said, "This could be published in a major journal." I didn't notice Nadia standing in the back of the room watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Later, she congratulated me. "That was really impressive," she said. But inside, I would learn much later, she was burning with resentment. She was asking herself, why does she get to do work that matters? Why does she get to help people? Why is her research more exciting than mine? What am I doing wrong? The answer, she decided, was not to work harder. The answer was to make sure I couldn't succeed. It was a Tuesday night in March. I was staying late in the lab on campus testing a new version of my prosthetic leg. I had made significant improvements, and I wanted to verify that the durability had increased. I was so focused on the work that I didn't notice the time. It was 2 a.m. when I finally packed up and headed back to the dorm. I was exhausted. I fell asleep immediately. What I didn't know was that Nadia had followed me to the lab. She had seen me leave, and she had waited. She went to my lab station. She knew my password. I had given it to her months earlier when her laptop crashed during an important project and she needed to access some files to complete her work. I had trusted her completely. She accessed my laptop. She found the folders containing all my prosthetics designs, every iteration, every test result, every specification, every component diagram. She copied everything onto a USB drive. She took the USB drive back to our dorm room and uploaded the files to a cloud service that couldn't be traced to her. Then she deleted the files from the USB drive and the cloud service history covering her tracks. Then she called her boyfriend Marcus, who she knew had connections in the medical device industry. She said, "I have something for you, something that could make us both very rich." A week later, I was scrolling through social media during a study break when I saw a post from a major medical device company called MediCore Solutions. The post said, "Exciting announcement, we're launching a revolutionary new prosthetic leg designed with cutting-edge materials and 3D printing technology, available at a fraction of traditional costs, coming to market in Q3. I clicked on the post, and my blood ran cold. The prosthetic leg in the image was my design, not something similar, my design, my specifications, my innovations. Every component, every detail, every breakthrough I had spent 3 years developing. I sat there for a long time staring at the screen. Then I called my father. "They stole my design," I told him, and I could hear the tremor in my own voice. My father listened carefully as I explained everything. "You need to check your laptop," he said. "See what happened." I went to my laptop and checked the access logs. Someone had accessed my files at 2 a.m. on the Tuesday night I was at the lab. Only one person had my password. I went back to the dorm room. Nadia was there, studying. "Why did you access my laptop 2 weeks ago?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Nadia didn't look up from her books. "My laptop was having issues," she said casually. "I needed to check something." "That's a lie," I said. "You needed to steal my designs." Now she looked at me, and her face was cold, colder than I had ever seen her. "Yes," she said, "I did." I couldn't believe she was admitting it. "Why would you do this?" I asked. "We were friends." Nadia stood up. I had never seen her like this. The friendly, helpful roommate was gone. What was left was someone consumed by rage. "You were supposed to be like me," she said. "You were supposed to be another engineering student just trying to get through the program. But instead, you had to be special. You had to be trying to change the world. You had to make me feel like I was nothing." "I never tried to make you feel like anything," I said. "I was just doing my work. Your work made me look bad. Your work made me feel like I wasn't enough, and I couldn't stand it anymore." "So you stole my design and sold it to a company?" I asked. "I gave it to my boyfriend," she said. "He has contacts in the medical device industry. He sold your design to MediCore Solutions for $500,000. He's using the money to start his own consulting business, and I'm getting a cut." "That's my work," I said, and now I could feel the tears starting. "That's 3 years of my life. That's my innovation. That's my dream." "It was your dream," she said. "Now it's their product, and there's nothing you can do about it." She was wrong about that. I was devastated. For 3 days, I barely left my dorm room. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't focus. My mother called me on the 3rd day, sensing that something was wrong. "Zara?" she said. "What's happened?" I told her everything. I told her about Nadia, I told her about the theft, I told her about MediCore Solutions launching my design. My mother listened in silence, and then she said, "Sweetie, you need to talk to someone, a lawyer, your university. We need to take action." "What's the point?" I said. "My design is already out there. They're already manufacturing it. What can I possibly do?" "You can fight for what's yours," my mother said firmly. "That's what you can do." I met with the MIT legal department. They were sympathetic, but realistic. "You did good work," the legal advisor said, "but proving that this is your design and not just a similar design developed independently will be difficult. Do Do you have documentation, dated files, witnesses to your work? I did have documentation. I had my lab notebooks, dated and time-stamped. I had presentations I had given to my professors. I had multiple people who could testify that I had been working on this design before MediCore announced theirs. That's helpful, the legal advisor said, but MediCore will likely argue that they developed this independently. The burden of proof is on you. She recommended that I hire an intellectual property lawyer. That's when I realized something. The legal system was going to take months, maybe years. By then, MediCore would already have launched. They would already have market share. They would already have made a profit on my design. And the worst part? Even if I won, what would I get? Damages? Some money paid to me? But I wouldn't get my design back. I wouldn't get the legacy. I wouldn't get the credit. I was sitting in my dorm room, staring at the blank walls, feeling completely defeated, when my brother David called. "Zara," he said, "Mom told me what happened. I'm so sorry." We talked for a while. David was my rock. He had always believed in me, even when I doubted myself. "You could do it again," he said finally. "You know how to do this. You've done it once. You could do it again. Better this time, smarter this time." "Why would I?" I asked. The whole point was to help people, and now someone else is profiting from my work. "But people will still get the help," David said. "Even if MediCore is the one selling it, people who couldn't afford prosthetics before will now be able to afford them. Isn't that what you wanted?" I hadn't thought about it that way. "And besides," David continued, "you're not the kind of person who gives up. You're the kind of person who gets back up and builds something even better." I made a decision. I was going to build a new prosthetic design, but this time I would make it even better. I would incorporate everything I had learned from watching MediCore launch my original design. I would create something that was not just affordable, but revolutionary. And this time, I would protect my work more carefully. I moved out of the dorm. I found a small laboratory space in Boston that I could afford, with help from my parents. I set up my equipment, and I started from scratch. I worked obsessively for the next year and a half. I developed a new prosthetic leg that used advanced biomimetic principles, designs inspired by how the human body actually moves. I incorporated artificial intelligence that could learn the user's walking patterns and adapt in real time. I created a prosthetic that was not just a replacement for a lost limb, but an enhancement, something that could potentially give amputees better mobility than they had before their amputation. And I did it at a cost that was even lower than my original design. The total manufacturing cost was $2,000. With a reasonable markup, it could be sold for $8,000, still a fraction of traditional prosthetics. But before I released this design, I made sure it was protected. I filed for patents. I documented every step of the process. I created detailed technical drawings that were registered with the United States Copyright Office. I recorded videos of myself explaining the innovation, with timestamps and witnesses. I hired an intellectual property lawyer and created legal structures to protect my work. I opened every file on my father's personal laptop, not mine. And the laptop had biometric security and encryption that made it virtually impossible for anyone to access without his direct involvement. I made backups of every file, stored in multiple locations. I told my family, my professors, and my mentors exactly what I was doing and why. I was not going to make the mistake of leaving my work vulnerable again. In January 2024, I publicly released my new prosthetic design, but I didn't release it to a corporation. I released it through a non-profit organization that I had founded called Limbs for All. The mission was simple: to provide affordable, high-quality prosthetics to anyone who needed them, regardless of their ability to pay. I open-sourced the design. Other prosthetic manufacturers could use it. Communities could manufacture it themselves using 3D printers and locally sourced materials. The design was free, the knowledge was free, the innovation was free. Within weeks, the story went viral on social media. MIT graduate student releases free prosthetic design to help amputees worldwide, the headlines read. This engineer is changing the prosthetics industry, another headline proclaimed. Universities wanted to partner with me. Medical device companies wanted to manufacture my designs. Patients started reaching out, excited about the possibility of affordable prosthetics. MediCore Solutions, which had been riding high on the success of my stolen design, suddenly looked like the villain in this story. Within a month, investigative journalists started digging into how MediCore obtained their prosthetics design. They discovered that Nadia's boyfriend had sold the designs to MediCore. They found emails between him and MediCore executives discussing the design and the price. They traced the designs back to my work at MIT. MediCore realized they were in serious trouble. They had based an entire product launch on stolen intellectual property. They had profited millions of dollars, and they had done it in the most obvious, traceable way possible. The CEO of MediCore called me directly. "Dr. Mitchell, I need to discuss the origins of our prosthetics design." "I'm aware of the origins. They're my designs. You stole them." "We purchased those designs in good faith. We weren't aware that they were intellectual property that didn't belong to the seller." "That's not my problem. That's yours." "I'd like to make this right. I'd like to offer you a settlement, $5 million, and we'll credit you as the designer of the prosthetic." $5 million. It was more money than I had ever dreamed of. But I turned it down. I don't want your money. I want accountability. I filed a lawsuit against MediCore Solutions for intellectual property theft, breach of copyright, and fraud. I filed a separate lawsuit against Nadia Chen and Marcus for theft of intellectual property and tortious interference. The evidence was overwhelming. I had my original design documents, all dated and time-stamped. I had the lab notebooks where I had sketched out every component. I had the presentations I had given to professors with dates recorded in the university system. I had testimony from MIT faculty members who could verify that I had developed this design. I had the access logs showing that my laptop had been accessed at 2 a.m., and I had evidence that only Nadia had my password. I had Nadia's own admission that she had stolen my designs. And most importantly, I had a side-by-side comparison of my original design and MediCore's design. They were identical. The trial took place in federal court in Boston, in front of a judge and jury. I testified about my design process. I explained the innovation. I described how I had given my password to Nadia under false pretenses and how she had used it to steal my work. I showed the jury the evidence, the dated designs, the lab notebooks, the video testimony from my professors. Nadia testified in her own defense, and she actually admitted to accessing my laptop and copying my files. She claimed it was a mistake, that she had meant to just borrow a file for a moment and had accidentally downloaded everything. No one believed her. MediCore argued that they had acted in good faith, that they weren't aware the designs were stolen when they purchased them, but the evidence showed that they hadn't done any due diligence. They hadn't verified that the seller had rights to the intellectual property. They hadn't questioned how the designs had been obtained. They had simply accepted the designs and started manufacturing. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Then they returned with a verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge ordered MediCore to pay me $15 million in damages. The judge also ordered Nadia and Marcus to pay an additional $2 million, jointly and severally. But more importantly, the judge issued an injunction preventing MediCore from manufacturing or selling the stolen design. MediCore had to recall all products made from my original design. They had to issue refunds to customers. They had to publicly acknowledge that they had sold a product based on stolen intellectual property. For Nadia, the judgment was personally devastating. She didn't have $2 million. She couldn't pay. She ended up having to drop out of MIT. She lost her career before it had even started. With the settlement and the judgment money, I did something that many people thought was foolish. I founded a non-profit prosthetics company. I used the funds to build manufacturing facilities. I hired engineers and prosthetics specialists. I created training programs for people who wanted to learn the technology. I made prosthetics affordable for everyone. Within 3 years, Limbs for All had provided prosthetics to over 50,000 people across the world. In countries where prosthetics were previously inaccessible, people were walking again. Children were running. Veterans were returning to work. The impact was immeasurable. MediCore, humiliated by the lawsuit and the public exposure, made a dramatic pivot. They approached me with a proposal. They wanted to use my design. They wanted to manufacture affordable prosthetics at scale. They wanted to partner with me. I was skeptical at first, but I realized that accepting their help would allow us to reach more people faster, and my mission was to help people, not to hold grudges. We formed a partnership. MediCore manufactures and distributes the prosthetics. Limbs for All handles the innovation, the training, and the distribution to people who can't afford even the discounted price. Together, we've changed the prosthetics industry. I'm 28 years old now, and I look back on this journey with a mix of emotions. I was betrayed by someone I considered a friend, someone I had helped, someone I had shared my dreams with. But that betrayal became the catalyst for something bigger than my original design. If Nadia hadn't stolen from me, maybe I would have stayed comfortable. Maybe I would have partnered with some company to commercialize my design, and we would have made prosthetics cheaper than they were before, but not free. Instead, I was forced to start from scratch. I was forced to create something even better. I was forced to think about scale in a different way, and the result is that more people have been helped than ever would have been helped otherwise. I learned something profound through this experience. The injustice you suffer doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of something bigger. Nadia wanted to stop me. She wanted to take what I had built and use it for profit, but she failed. Not because the legal system protected me, although it did. She failed because I refused to let her define my future. I took what was stolen from me and I created something even more valuable. My father gave me a piece of advice the day the jury returned with the guilty verdict. He said, "Zara, you had a choice. You could have taken the money and walked away. You could have started a private practice and gotten rich selling prosthetics to wealthy people. You could have become bitter and focused on punishing Nadia. Instead, you chose to help people, and that choice will impact more lives than any other choice you could have made." It's 2029 now, and Limbs for All has grown beyond what I ever imagined. We've provided prosthetics to over 200,000 people across 40 countries. We've trained over 1,000 prosthetic specialists. We've open-sourced our technology so that local communities in low-income countries can manufacture their own prosthetics. My designs have won international awards. I've been invited to speak at conferences worldwide. I've been profiled in magazines as one of the young innovators changing healthcare. But the accolade that means the most to me came from a 12-year-old girl named Maya from Nigeria. She lost her leg in an accident. Using our open-source design and local manufacturing resources, her community was able to create a prosthetic leg for Maya. When Maya walked for the first time with her new leg, she cried. Her mother cried. The entire community celebrated. She sent me a video. In it, she said, "Thank you for giving me my life back." That video is framed in my office.
Nadia Chen dropped out of MIT after the lawsuit. The last I heard, she was working as a data analyst for a tech company, far removed from engineering. The $2 million judgment against her was never paid. She didn't have the means, but the judgment is on her record, following her through her career. Marcus, her boyfriend, was convicted of fraud and served 2 years in prison. MediCore Solutions, after the initial crisis, actually became better. Under new leadership, they committed to manufacturing affordable prosthetics responsibly. They've partnered with Limbs for All and donated millions to prosthetics research. My mother once told me that the measure of success is not how much money you make, but how many lives you improve. I think about that often.
Nadia tried to steal my success, but she couldn't steal my purpose. She couldn't steal my commitment to helping people. She couldn't steal my determination to make the world more just. What she did do was force me to make a choice, and I chose to build something bigger than I ever would have built if she had just left me alone. I chose to make my stolen design free to the world. I chose to create a nonprofit instead of a for-profit company. I chose to help people instead of punish my enemy. I'm 33 years old now, and I own nothing. No company, no wealth accumulated from my inventions, but I have something far more valuable. I have the knowledge that over 200,000 people are walking because of my work. I have the satisfaction of knowing that my technology is available to anyone who needs it, regardless of their circumstances. I have built something that will outlive me, something that will continue to help people long after I'm gone. And I have the peace of mind that comes from knowing I did the right thing even when it was hard. Nadia wanted to stop me, but instead of stopping me, she inspired me to create something that transcends any single person or company. That is the real victory. Not the lawsuit, not the money, not the fame, but the lives changed, the people helped, the future transformed. The architects of hope aren't always the ones with the biggest dreams. Sometimes they're the ones who refuse to let their dreams be stolen and instead choose to share them with the world. That's who I became. And I wouldn't change a single moment of this journey, even the painful parts, because every part of it led me to where I am now.